Okay, welcome to another live stream. Today I'm going to be editing the black and white photography from the last job I shared with you guys live. So if you have not checked that out, you might want to. Later today you can kind of get an idea of what all the images look like. I looked at the entire job in that video, all 2,600 or so images. Today what I'm going to be doing is going through my black and white photography and doing those edits live. So here we go. So as I mentioned in the last video, the first thing I do is I designate which images I'm going to convert to black and white. I want to take advantage of Lightroom's powerful cataloging tools where I can designate certain images for certain things. And what I like to do is just label everything I know will be converted to a black and white image blue. I use most of the labels. I use yellow for will not deliver but do not want to delete. Red will be a select. I use the pick tool at times as well. I'll do that. For example, like maybe I select a bunch of images with a red label because I'm going to use it in a YouTube video, but then I need to pick between similar images, and then I will also use the pick tool. So you can kind of double up on your labeling. You actually have several labeling tools. There's the pick, unpick, moving over you have different star ratings, and then you have color labels. Honestly, I don't think there's like a specific way that works best. I think you have to find what works for you. And I use what works for me. So the very first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the blue label, make sure I have flagged and unflagged, or picked and unpicked. I have the rejects not visible. I won't delete them yet. I'm going to hit Command A, and then I'm going to use the hotkey, which is V, to convert them all to black and white. That's my first step. Now, just a reminder, my computer is up for an upgrade, so it takes a little bit longer than it should. Eventually, it's going to get to the point where I feel like I'm losing money, not gaining money by not upgrading, because I value my time more than anything, and the more time I'm spending on editing, the less time I'm spending on other things that could potentially bring me in more business or just for personal stuff. I don't live to work. I work to live. I shoot professionally in order to shoot for myself. And so, let's go. Alright, so first of all, with black and white photography, I find that in general, rule of thumb, you can get away with a little bit more sharpening and a little bit more clarity. And so what I initially do is I will edit all of the images as if I'm going to keep them in color. So I batch edit them along with the color photography. After I've done that and I've converted them to black and white, I'll stay on Command A. I won't get off of that, and I'll maybe add a little bit of clarity, but not like a lot, just a little bit higher starting point. So maybe +5. If you're interested in learning all the hotkeys for Lightroom, when I'm hovering over one of the sliders, I can now press the up or down arrow key in order to go in +5 or -5 increments. So I also find that texture has been working quite well as well. So I'll do up 1 on the keyboard and add +5. I'm not going to play with contrast because I know the type of photography I'm editing. They all have pretty high levels of contrast as they are, and I don't really want to add. So they were already pretty contrasty. I added +15 globally to all of the color photography, which these started as, and now I'm just going to decide if I want to add even more because they're black and white, and I'm going to choose no. I believe that the type of lighting, etc., gave me a really good starting point, and I do not want to mess with it. So I'm going to hit Command D to deselect. And now I can select my first two images. Why my first two? Well, because they are actually quite similar. Well, they're identical lighting wise. Now the first thing I will typically do is I will go, again, not global in the sense that I'm editing multiple images, but global in the sense like I'm going to make the largest changes to the more narrow changes. I'm going to go in that order. So first would be, do I need to change my exposure, contrast, highlights, etc.? Typically I don't need to do too much because, like I said, I edited these in color first, and just converting them into black and white won't change too much. So after that, like I said, texture, clarity, I just go with, I'm not gonna lie to you guys, I don't have time to play around with sharpening too much. I don't think it's going to be appreciable, whatever the word is, for my client. So I will often go with medium for everything, and these already had that applied. So what I can do now is then go to the more specific fine tuning. So one helpful way to edit your black and white photography is to compare the color to the now black and white. Why do that? We do that because we have really powerful tools in Lightroom to do, rather than dodging and burning, we can basically, in a sense, dodge and burn by color rather than with a brush. So for example, when I can see my color image on the left and my black and white on the right, and let's say I want to make my background more dynamic. I want it to have a greater tonal range. So what I can do is I can say, okay, I have blue here, and I want it to contrast with the browns and the yellow and the oranges. And so I can go to my blues and I can pull them down, and I can add and then I can get a more dramatic background. I'm going to do that again. You guys can see how it, when I go to the far right versus the far left. Now there are limits to what you can do without it looking cartoony. So I'm not going to go too far. Now what if I like the black and the blues, I like the pulling down the blues in the background, but I didn't want it to happen here. Well, what I can probably do then is I can do I'm going to leave it there. I want to have just a bit of texture, and apologies, I don't know what you would call him. I think it's a priest. I want a little bit to see some detail, but I loved how he kind of faded to black minus his mask. And so what I can then do instead is I can do a brush adjustment, and rather than targeting any colors, maybe I'll go to contrast, and I can then just do a contrast brush in the background if I want to add more contrast. The idea being to get a greater tonal range in the image. Okay, now is a good time to kind of have a quick discussion. Welcome to the stream, Deliciously Me. I know who you are. Welcome. You can go back to that one after. This one will be helpful, I think. I'm going to get a little bit more technical. So, when it comes to, I used to have a lab instructor. He was a lab instructor at UCLA, and he would always say, if you asked for his opinion, he always gave you a very good response, very well weighted, and then he would just say, "You're the artist," and I'm like, "You're right. You know, you're the artist, and you can decide what you want to do. You can defy convention. You can go with convention. You can go with the traditional kind of Ansel Adams style of printing, editing, where we get a nice tonal range with the right percentage of each tone. Or you can do whatever you want. You can go with a high key contrast image. I tend to typically follow the traditional route, and so while this is fading to black, if we have the benefit of not just relying on our eye, I can look at the metadata, the histogram, and I can see that my blacks have not quite clipped. And even if they had, I actually really like the way he fades into a black, and it kind of it gives them equal weight in different ways, where we have a clear picture of the priest, but there's something to it to me, and I'm not able to articulate it well. If you agree with me and you can articulate it better than I can, go ahead and throw it in the chat. But I like the way he's anonymized. Is that a word? So I actually did a little bit of minor editing to these earlier, and then I kind of made the decision I would do a live stream, and so I stopped. But we can hit D to get back to develop, and we can kind of see, oh no, I think I reset it. So I'm going to hit the compare tool. Here's one with, well, that's odd. So I'm seeing a lot of pixelation, and I don't know if it's my computer or not. So it wasn't like that before, but maybe I just didn't catch it. Again, there's a limit to what you can do. It's just loading. There is a limit to how much you can tweak an image using those kind of black and white sliders. So what I'm going to do, I made an edit on this one earlier. I'm going to hit Command C or Control C if you're on a PC. Move over to the other one, and I'm going to hit Command V to paste it. And then it will paste the exact settings. What I did earlier to this image, if we hit Y, I wanted to kind of have him pop, him kind of be the center, and him somewhere in the middle as far as his head covering goes. And then what I did is I did change some of the greens in the background just to make it a little bit more dynamic. Let's see. I brought down the blues because I really wanted the middle to kind of be darker so that their heads could pop a little bit more. If you guys have any questions for me, I'd be more than happy to answer any. We'll try to keep, it can be anything, but if you have a black and white photography question for me, that would be good. Here we can look at an image that we're getting some clipping. I can click on the arrow, and now it highlighted in red what's being clipped. Now, I don't personally believe that it's a problem if something that's non-essential is clipping a little bit. Like, these are just highlights, basically. If we turn that off, we can see it's just some highlights in like a mirror or the metallic highlight. It's not really a problem for me. So how can I improve this image? I'll be honest with you guys. Often I find if the image looked good in color, I don't need to do too much in the black and white. And there's a limit to how much time I can spend on every image. We do this as a service. It's my job, right? It's not my artwork where you can pour 10 hours into a photo if you want. I personally do not, but you could if you wanted. And you'll notice the difference, and since you're doing it for yourself, it is worth it. But when you're doing it for a client that probably will not know the difference, and you are running a business, you have to think about it. You know, you have to think about it. And so I typically won't allot too much time, as much as I'm probably going to spend today, also because I'm talking while I edit. Alright, so how can we improve on this one? I'm going to hit Y. I want to see my before and after. I like the tonal range. I feel like it could use a little bit more in the mid-tones perhaps. We have a lot of shadows. I like the every other almost of these two guys where we have someone wearing white. We could possibly exaggerate that a bit more. We could do that by pulling down the shadows, which will pull both of them down. Or we can do that only to him by affecting the purples. Now another tool I have is, rather than going by the sliders and looking at the side by side, you can actually use that little, I don't know what you call it, adjust black and white mix by dragging in the photo. It doesn't have a name, we'll say. And then what you can do is you can hover over an area and pull it down or pull it up. So if I pull down here, I know it's a purple shirt, all the purples will get pulled down. Now that works for me because he's the only person in purple. What if I want to pop some skin tones relative to clothing? Pretty much everyone has orange in their skin, and if I pull that up, it pops up the skin tones. Here's an image that feels a little muddy to me overall, so how can I change that? A lot of it has to do with the light. It's kind of like not the greatest quality of light, but I'm going to experiment with pulling up texture and a little clarity first. Maybe then even pulling up contrast a touch. So now we have a better starting point. Now, I would love to get a little more contrast between that, and that. Maybe like go from a darker to a pretty traditional middle gray to like a lighter tone. If I manipulate the orange and yellows here though, I would manipulate her skin too much. But what I can do is I can do a local brush later. What I'll do is I want to really make her the blues pop by bringing them down, darkening them. So let's do that first. I'll try this method. Like that, maybe a little less so I can get some detail. Of course, if this were like a really important image to me, I could eventually zoom in and really dodge and burn and improve my clarity and really make the texture pop if I wanted. I'm going to try pulling these down. Nah. That kind of worked. Helpful feedback for me would be if you enjoy just watching me work without me having to speak. I do get parched. Remember, I make this content for you guys, so let me know what works best for you. There's nothing wrong with looking at an image, liking it, and moving on. Not everything needs an edit. I liked this image because it felt like a very traditional, and I don't know what's behind it, but a very traditional way of working. All the food preps, I guess that's what you'd call them, would do it on the floor. And I liked that kind of like what felt like a very traditional way of working, contrasting with use of modern technology. I loved making this image. I love the repetition of the geometry. You have like a rectangle here, rectangle here, rectangle here, and then you have this kind of organized chaos leading into my subject matter, and his arch and his spine rounds off that composition there. You have a little bit more of a story, the eye will follow the pan, the onions, round out here, and then draws your eye right here to more workers. So I'm going to, let's take a look at the color version. As it loads, I'm going to take a look at the comments real quick. Do you recommend using expired film over new ones? Heard film has horse gelatin. That's true. It has gelatin, and don't really feel comfortable contributing to more production of that. Are you a vegan? Because while it is true, I don't think it's like a ton. And then I think it is worthwhile seeing where they source it from. But of course, even if it's waste from the meat industry. That's a tough one, and I can't answer that for you. And if I don't think you didn't exactly say it, but I think you're kind of saying, well, if I'm using expired film, then perhaps I'm not contributing because it's already been made. It's kind of a fair point, It's kind of like buying a fur coat at Goodwill, I suppose, rather than buying a new fur coat. This is my own philosophy. Nobody's perfect. I really do my best. I can't stand waste. I've hated plastics. Even as a little boy, I recognized plastics are horrible. The idea of waste is horrible. We make things out of materials that we don't need to use that material. Like why do we need to make plastic straws? Paper straws are fine. It's renewable. Why do they use foam padding when you get something from Amazon? Blah blah blah. So I'm very careful, and so I allow myself, because I don't want to live with an insane amount of guilt. I'm careful so that I can not worry so much when it comes to the things that matter to me, like shooting film I care about. I'm not shooting a tremendous amount of film. When I'm shooting a lot of film, I shoot a lot more than your average person, but I go through waves. Subvids says, evening all. Let me finish answering that question too. Or let me know what else you're curious about in regards to shooting film, because black and white film holds up really well. I've shot with very old black and white film successfully, like 20, 30 years was fine. Not even adding time, by the way, to my exposure or anything. If you're talking color, I mean, it's up to you. Are you looking for the cleanest image you can get? But in film, I mean, and you don't want to shoot digital, which would be cleaner, or do you want that unpredictable nature of shooting expired film? Do you like the unpredictable aesthetic, that kind of thing? That old lady looked amazing. No need to speak all the time. Looking at the pics and editing is enough for a few minutes at a time. And then subvids. I've been trying to edit portraits of me in black and white, finding it difficult to get it nice and contrasty. Is it necessary to have an absolute black? I talked about that earlier. I had a lab instructor when I was in college who would give me great feedback, but in the end he would always say, "You're the artist, and it's up to you. Do you want to go for that traditional tonal range, that Ansel Adams print kind of thing, or do you want to do what you prefer aesthetically? You can go for a high contrast image that has a lot of black and a lot of white." There's no correct answer. I typically am going for that correct tonal range, but I'm not a rigid thinker. Some people, they're very rigid in how they think, and I'm not someone. I know what I like, but I'm not a rigid thinker, and I always question my own beliefs and try to grow. So back to the image. I just want to be able to see the phone. There's not much color I can bring out, so I'm going to do a simple, lost my train of thought, a simple bump to the midtones. Sometimes I'm blind, so I'm going to hit M to find midtones. There, never mind, shadows. Brain fart. Okay, I'm going to just pull up the shadows a little bit. And I can also, once I've done that brush adjustment, apply new things to that same adjustment. So I can go up on clarity, for example. Or I can go up on contrast. Let's try highlights, see if we can pop up that glare, that reflection. That worked. Now hit Z to zoom out, and now we can see he's on the phone a little bit better than we could before. So talking about what I'll convert to black and white is a kind of scientific and also a very subjective feeling. And then there's practical reasons I'll convert to black and white. I have multiple images that are similar, and I'll just make one black and white, keep one in color, delete the rest. Sometimes I'll make a black and white because it can hide imperfections. Like, I would not normally shoot into the light in the way I'm shooting here. However, it was a moment. They're like, "Can you grab our shot?" Quickly grabbed it. It looks quite nice still. And I'm not going to throw it out because it's not perfect, But I thought black and white actually works a bit better. It can hide mistakes. It can hide slightly out of focused images a bit more. It has that subjective feeling like, well, it's more lively when it's slightly out of focus, but in black and white. May not be explaining that super well. You're not that late, by the way, to the stream. I'm not going to go for as long as I did yesterday. I was so burnt out from that, actually. I know I teach. I do a YouTube channel, but I actually don't have a very strong voice. It gets very dry, and I feel burnt out talking 20 minutes, let alone 2.5 hours. That was a long stream. I'm bad at promoting my own stuff also, so I'm going to take a second to kind of at least post that I'm streaming to Facebook. If you guys want to support the channel, I would love if you could, if there's anywhere you'd like to post it, please do. Help get word out. So here is an image where, while I do feel like this area kind of balances out that, I do feel like it's a bit top heavy. So what I'm going to do in just a moment after I post my live stream is I'm going to crop it in a little bit. I think it will work better. One thing I didn't mention, there are certain images that, for reasons and some you're aware of and some you are not, it might be more intuitive, will work better as black and white. Some work better as in color, and some work really well in both. And so what I'll do is I'll make a duplicate. For the professional photographers watching, though, you have to be careful about that. Sometimes when they realize then they're like, any image can be a black and white, or any image can be in color, and you can open yourself up to requests where they want you to like maybe convert a bunch of other images into black and white that you didn't plan on doing. So keep that in mind. So one little trick, if it's the same image I made a duplicate of, I'll maybe crop it a little bit differently, just so it looks a bit different. Not afraid to admit that. How is that silvery black and white achieved? There's a little bit of a delay, and also I'm not always looking at the chat, so try to be more specific for me, because I'm not sure which image you meant. Thanks, brother. Been vegan for over 2 years, but just found out about the gelatin. I shoot digital 90% of the time, but film is nice once in a while, so I shoot expired color or black and white. Yeah, I haven't thought too much about that. I feel you. I was a vegetarian for like a good portion of my life, and I've been vegan before. Right now I'm not, because I have such a sensitive stomach and such a restrictive diet that if I didn't eat chicken and fish, I would be able to eat almost nothing, and so I can't be vegetarian. And it kills me. It really does, and it's difficult for me. Every meal is a little tough. I wish I had an answer, but I empathize with you. Okay, so here's one. I like that high contrast look, and if you look here, he is wearing a black shirt. It is a contrasty image in color as well. So here there's nothing that screams at me that I want to change, but like as a teacher, I like to explore possibilities. So for example, I do like the way his skin tone pops, but if I wanted to mute that, I can pull down the oranges, that kind of thing. I can play around with the purple here, but I don't really want to. Yeah, honestly, I'm not even gonna play with that one. I like it. Here we have what feels a bit muddy, not quite a great range of tonal range, not a great tonal range. Not a bad one, but I'm gonna go global with my contrast, maybe. Pull that up a touch. And then rather than pull midtones up, I'm just gonna target skin tones to make her pop a little bit. There we go. That's one of them. One of the things I've heard. Leaky gut. Leaky gut is, I think, also not like the ailment. It's like the symptom of something going on. Yeah, I don't know, to be honest. So, looking at this, I love the color, but I have a color version too. So just if you're thinking, well, why would you make that black and white? I have color versions as well. So, what can I do here? The whole altar feels a bit monochromatic in a sense, or you guys get what I'm saying? It's a bit flat. What can we do? What can we do? We have a lot of orange and we have a lot of blues. I wouldn't mind a contrast between the two, but if I bring down the blues, or I can bring the greens down and kind of create more layers to the background, that would look good. So I'm just vocalizing like the internal thought process I would normally have, so you guys can see. Pull down the highlights, get a little bit more detail in here. Maybe I'll do a local contrast brush. Like that. I wish I could make, I mean, this is such a targeted way of editing black and whites, but I wish I could do that with a brush, where if I have like a yellow here and then something else, I can just darken the yellows. There's probably a way around that. I'd have to think. And for now, maybe I'll do a secondary brush and just target that. This is more contrast than the last brush. There's really so much you can do with black and white. I kind of like the woman here, slightly obscured. Okay, it's funny you bring up veganism and then I get an alert for a vegan YouTube channel, Earthling Ed. Okay. Stop messaging. Alright, I have an interview next week for e-commerce photography and a semi-sustainable fashion company that sells secondhand luxury bags. Do you like studio photography? Not really. You know, I think a lot of the photography people gravitate toward because they think it's going to be more creative. And they don't regard like maybe event photography as that creative, and I think they're kind of wrong, to be honest. I don't think fashion photography, while some get to be really creative with it, like the great fashion photographers, absolutely. Helmut Newton, yeah, great photography. Yeah, by the way, Earthling Ed is incredibly persuasive and an excellent speaker. I actually quite admire his skills, but that's a tangent. Yeah, he could probably convince anybody. But train of thought, what was I talking about? Yeah, like most of what you're going to be doing as a fashion photographer is not that creative, and you're just making the clothing look good. Or if you're doing commercial fashion photography, it's very streamlined. Like, go to levis.com and look at the kind of work. It's not creative exactly. So really, and most studio photography, like product photography, that has no appeal to me personally, at all. I don't like photographs of things that much. So I don't love it. Now, I do love lighting. I enjoy it, and while I've gravitated more later in my career towards simplicity when it comes to my event photography, like a lot of the Mick and Bricks photos I did, and if you're new to my channel or haven't seen the work, I do have like a semi-hidden link on my website. If you go to mickmilliman.com, there's a M and B section. So I enjoyed lighting those, but those weren't in a studio in the sense that I didn't necessarily have a studio backdrop. So I'm going to post the link in the chat to my Mick and Bricks photos, which I'm going to start shooting more of again. And you can also go to, under the same tab, if you go to projects and go to PWT, that's for people who train. Those are all studio portraits of jiu-jitsu people. And then if you want to check out my film photography, you can do that too. For your personal work, do you find you use film or digital more? All my personal work in the last 2 years was street photography exclusively shot on film. I don't find shooting street photography on digital that engaging. I love the challenge of shooting film, getting that decisive moment. So I'm doing it. What I enjoy about shooting film is process and like the hands-on feel of different cameras. It's not about the aesthetic necessarily, to be honest, although I do love how film looks, but that's not why I shoot. If that was purely why I shot film, I could just buy film filters, Subvids, are you a jiu-jitsu person? I had an idea for added value to my Patreon page. I want to create like a group chat or a forum, and I know there's a way to do it, and find ways for everyone to help each other out. There's a lot of ways we could help each other out. By improving our search engine optimization, we can share links to each other's websites, that kind of thing, and just have a way to participate in conversation a bit better. Yeah, it's fun. The challenge of it you can shoot with intention with digital, but there is something about when you have limitations, and it's not the same as forced limitations. It's not. You know, some people argue, oh, put a small memory card in your camera that can only fit 36 frames, things like that. I don't buy that really. I think when we have an actual hard limitation versus like a soft limitation that's self-imposed, it's a bit different. I mean, yeah, I do feel that way. I do impose limitations on myself in jiu-jitsu that work really well. Like, I don't have that ego that gets off on beating people. I enjoy pushing myself as hard as possible and performing at an optimal level, getting very centered in my training where time melts away and I'm purely present. So when I'm sparring with a white belt, I don't get anything about beating a white belt, but if I just let them work, it can get boring. And for me, jiu-jitsu is as creative as photography. And so what I'll do is I won't use my hands or my arms or I won't even use my legs or whatever. And I create limitations that really force me to be creative and get me like engaged in it again. If I don't find something creative, I get bored, is what I'm starting to realize. So even when there's no need to be creative, I always look for like how I can play with the rule set of a game or whatever to make it interesting. I'm not terribly into the idea, but I'm just going to show you guys, if you're new to editing, what you can do in this image. I can go to my, I can do a gradient. So let's say, oh, it's a little darker here, and that's because we have different lighting here. They're under this like overhang thing. So what I can do, I'll go with an exposure, and I can increase it, and then I can drag across, and I get a gradation. I'm gonna exaggerate it so everyone can see. So rather than just, it's not like this is all gonna be like brighter. It's gonna have like a range. And I'm gonna leave it, but the tiniest bit. Well, shooting with intention is incredibly important as well. I mean, it's really one of the, I would say like my mission is to encourage people to shoot with intention. I see way too many photographers just take a picture to take a picture. And it's like, what was that about? What's that image about? That's a nice image. So I don't mind that this image is a wider shot, but what I do mind is that the compositional elements are like, it's not an ideal situation unless you're purposely avoiding it, is that all the elements will lead your eye into the subject matter. And right now, this, although it has some direction here, I don't have anything balancing it out here. I feel like I'm not rewarding the viewer enough, where you can reward the viewer for following the composition into the subject matter, into a great moment, and I feel like I'm not doing that here. So I think just bringing it in can help. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, not traditional Jiu-Jitsu. To be creative, instead of driving to a place I'm going, I leave earlier and walk there. Then on the way, I photograph things I like along the way. Yeah, it's a good way to do it. I like the color version of this image more, but I wanted to give it a shot and see how a black and white would look. So these are two different images. Or did I duplicate it? I copied it earlier because I was like, I'll make a black and white. But truthfully, I don't think I need it. I love the color. The black and white's not even doing too much. So since it's a duplicate, I'm just going to hit X and get rid of it. Rules and tips about headroom. It's a bit like I can't do the like YouTube version, my top 5 tips. Like I can't do that with that one. I feel like I like to fully explore things, but you can't go wrong with more or less like a rule of thirds on the eye line. So like, oops. So I'm not going to do that here, but like if I were here, that could work, for example. I'll keep it in mind for the images that I come across as I edit, though. I mean, here there's a little bit of an argument where I feel like there's a little bit too much room on the bottom, so I could bring it in a little bit. Would go there. I could bring that one in too. Yeah, I like the wide shots I got here too. I'm really trying to shoot more wide. I shot almost everything with one lens, the Canon RF50 1.2, and quite a bit, but much less with my 135mm. I've been experimenting a lot more with using like that lens for almost everything, but still getting that variety as well. So here, what did I shoot this with? Like, oops. I mean, I can tell, but I'll go down to the metadata. So here you go, the 135. But mostly I use the 50. If we go to metadata, this will be only for the black and whites, but we can go to lens, and oh wow, for the black and white, oddly enough, it's a fair split, but I don't think if we do everything, let's see, yeah, a bit more with the 50, 700 versus 560. It's a fairer split than I actually thought it would be. Here's an example of where I caught a moment I quite liked, but it's not quite sharp and there's motion blur. And so by converting it to black and white, I think I salvage it a bit. Feels more like spontaneous and organic. You got it, Aman. If people enjoy it, I'll do it more often. I want to still produce a video, like a normal video once a week, but I mean, I have stuff to edit every week. As long as I get my editing done by Friday, I don't mind that it takes a little bit longer. right now I'm on track. My other job from last weekend is done, but I always get my editing done ideally by Friday, or even before then if I have a Friday job, so that I can focus on my next batch of jobs. I don't want to be worrying about this job when I have a new one to edit. So I like the tonal range overall here. I think it's a beautiful moment for her. Looking at the color, there's some little bit of like green yellow, like a mustard. No, that's green. It's kind of like a mustardy green. I could play with the colors, or I'm actually thinking I'm gonna do a micro adjustment, a brush, and just up the contrast and clarity, both. So let's go contrast first. And I'll up the, can you not? Here we go. I really want to make her stand out, so I can do that by adding contrast. I like how she's sandwiched between the darks and the lights. Wonderful. Would you recommend 1.2 f lens for photography deer at night? Huh? Photographing deer at night. I shoot 35 mil. Sorry, I'm like blind with my glasses. I shoot 35 millimeter 1.8, but at 6,000 ISO, but I get a decent amount of grain. So, been holding my thoughts back on that lens. I refuse to watch the mainstream YouTubers. Okay? I refuse. I don't. I think everyone complains about them, but then they watch it. And, you know, it's like vote with your money kind of thing. Vote with your wallet. And that's what I do. I don't want to watch, like, people just hawking gear. So I refuse to watch it. I refuse to watch sensational clickbaity titles. All that said, because of how the internet works, I wake up and I look at the news, and then I see my personalized feed, and it's like Peter McKinnon says this about that lens, and I'm like, I don't care, and I will not watch the video, and I'm sure he's just hyping it up shamelessly, and he's paid to do that. So I've held back my own thoughts on the lens when I'm actually unbiased, which maybe that doesn't make sense either, but I thought I'd make a video on it, but I just didn't want to just haphazardly give you guys my subjective opinions or my experience with it if I felt it would sway you. I didn't want to sway anyone. And my opinions on it probably apply, for the record, to Nikon's version and Sony's version. But I'll share briefly what I feel about the lens, and it's goddamn phenomenal. It really is. Like, even at f1.2, it will lock on to the eye almost every time, like 99% of the time at least. I shot it in a very dimly lit bar, and I can show you guys those photos, and locked on almost every time in almost pure darkness, you know? It's a phenomenal way of working. It's something I could never do before. But I don't want to say it because I don't want people to think, oh, then I must need that lens. Like, I produced terrific work well before I ever had any prime that was at f1.2. In fact, I did not even own an f1.2 lens at all until, like, well, I got the lens a while ago, but I didn't get a camera that could use it until like 3 months ago. You know, it took me basically 13 years to buy one. So if you're starting out and you're like, I gotta get a 1.2 and it's like $2,300 or $2,700 or whatever, I mean, you don't need it. But my honest opinion is that it is phenomenal. It's not my favorite. I still really love the 135. I love the look of it. And a 50 is not for everything. Like, you can control shooting into the light a lot better when you have a narrow field of view. So if you're backlit, the 50 allows in a more flaring opportunity. So it's not like the end all be all, but it is a great overall lens, and I can shoot it at 1.2 extremely well. I'm going to make a first impressions video of my R6, but I'm going to make it in a vacuum. I don't want to watch any other videos on it. I'm not going to research anyone else. I'm not going to compare it to other cameras because I haven't used them. You know, I shoot Canon. But what I want to do is an impressions to give you like a pure version of what it's like for a professional that's been shooting DSLRs for 13 years and what it's like to transition to it. So I'm going to make that video. Hopefully it will be interesting to you guys. I feel like I went off on some tangents there, but I don't typically forget what I'm talking about, but I'm trying to edit as well. Sub says, is it tempting to use a preset to start you off on a project? I use my own, I talked about it last time, I use my own preset to match the Canon look of their JPEGs. In getting a new camera, and when I got the new camera, I realized they no longer offer, or they don't offer yet, a camera faithful option for the R6. And then I realized that the JPEGs look better than my RAWs color-wise, and it took me a very, very long time to finally figure out how I can replicate it, and then also have my RAW files where I have more latitude for edits. But I did, so I do that as a preset, and by the way, I should do it, but you can set Lightroom to add presets as you import. I typically don't. I just do it once they're all uploaded. I don't do a lot to them. But, you know, like I do like the sharpening preset to everything at once. I add a little bit of contrast, and then I do my own Canon skin tones preset I created that I'm selling for $1,000. And it took me, well, actually it did take me a long time to make, but I would never sell something that so ridiculous. I would never do that. I used to have the Visco presets. I was curious, you know, I wanted to see. I thought maybe like it'd help other people if I made a video about it years ago when I did more film photography content. I got the Visco preset, spent like whatever it was. I bought like 2 of them. I think it was like $50. And I found that like 90% of them were useless, but there was like 2 to 3 that I liked. But there was so much I had to do to get it to look right that it almost felt like there was no point in it being a preset. So I wasn't a huge fan, but I did really like the Tri-X and like a few others. But on a whole, I didn't find any of them to really look that much like the film they were supposed to make it look like. And the official answer as to why is like, well, you got it, it's a starting point. Well, it's a pretty far off starting point. As far as cropping here goes, I don't need half a woman's face, so I'll find a way to like bring it in, but I don't want to lose his hands. I can do an alternative crop perhaps, don't like that either. So I'm gonna opt for that, just leave it. There's stuff I can do though, like if I want to draw my eye, the viewer's eye, toward my subject matter. An example would be going and creating a gradient in which I'm actually going to darken it. just a little bit. I don't know how to say your name. And you've commented on my channel so many times, the only path. I shot a few protests, and there were brilliant moments that turned out to be blurry in the photo. Advice on not feeling defeated. Well, first, you just always need to be mindful of your settings. Even when you're shooting an aperture priority, you should always be minding your settings and looking at the shutter speed it's picking for you. And if it's picking a shutter speed too slow, you have to then raise your ISO. So shooting in manual is not like you set and go. Sometimes you set it and then you just keep shooting because it's going to be more consistent than aperture priority or shutter priority, where if you slightly change your composition, it will change its exposure. It's typically a very organic process when done right, where your fingers are constantly making adjustments. As far as not feeling defeated, you did the best you could do at the time you did it. I don't have any profound advice. I have the advice that has been given for thousands of years. You do the best you can. You only worry about what's in your control. And at the time, it wasn't in your control. If you could have done better, you would have done better. And you have to forgive yourself and move on. All you can do is, what did I do wrong, in a very dispassionate kind of way? You assess it. You have to be calculating about it, not in like that sociopathic way, like calculating in that you're not beating yourself up. You're just like, what did I do wrong? How could I improve upon it? That's it. And that's why I really encourage you guys to create a photo journal. I had one starting out for sure. Now I still know what I'm working on, but I don't write it out as much. But maybe I could benefit from it still, but I don't need to as much to write it out. There's stuff I'm always working on, though. Thanks, Paul. I'm excited to deliver these. It's always exciting to be done with your work for the week, but I think I did a good job. So I love to identify alternative crops. Sometimes I'll make a duplicate and crop it, but really, like, this is a nice kind of image here, and what I'm going to look into is something like that. Now when I do that, I lose her knee, which kind of rounded the image off, the composition, so it doesn't work. Let's reset. I could do what I did earlier, where I can kind of pull your eye away from here and pull it in here by darkening that side, or I could even brighten it, because then we would have a contrast, a dark and a light. I really don't love having his face cropped here, but it's not that bad actually. Now what would really work here, I've gotten used to shooting in that 1-to-1 kind of cropping ratio, because I'll shoot with a TLR pretty often. It's a twin lens reflex, which shoots in a square format. So if I hit R, and I can go to 1-to-1, and you guys can see that would work. But I don't deliver images in 1-to-1 crops, not to clients. I don't do that. Just a reminder, I've been posting more to my Patreon page as well. I'm just trying to be as active as possible, and help people as much as I can. So on Patreon, I've been posting stuff I can't post to YouTube necessarily. I think I need to separate what's for my clients and what's for you guys, mostly watching, which are photographers. Yeah. Paul, that's not actually what I'm suggesting. What I'm suggesting is you just be more mindful of settings, even if you're shooting in a priority mode. You always see, like, if you're choosing aperture, just be mindful of what the shutter is doing. Now, I have a different approach to making sure I have a fast enough shutter. I rarely I can control my shutter by controlling my aperture and my ISO. So for example, if I'm in aperture priority and I'm concerned about capturing motion, I just open up my aperture more because I know my camera will be forced to choose a faster shutter. And that's how I control it. If you're shooting, I mean, you can shoot in shutter priority, that can work too, but I've always cared more about controlling my depth of field than like what my shutter is at. It's usually good enough. And again, I mind my shutter while in aperture priority mode by changing my aperture. And if I'm open all the way and I'm looking at my shutter and it's still too slow, what do? I raise my ISO. You never use vignettes? I do, here and there. Again, I really loved her, I don't know if this has a word, but the texture. So skin tone's accurate. I don't want to mess with it, but maybe I'll do a local brush. Starting off with contrast, but I will also add a little bit of clarity. Just paint it in. Actually, don't think I need the contrast. I loved these. So remember, if they're both pretty much the same exposure wise, and so I'm going to edit them together unless I do a local brush adjustment. So Paul says, I mostly shoot in manual. If the movement is not an issue, I use your recommendation and shoot in lower shutter speed, especially with a stabilized lens. Yeah. Do you agree with people who say modern photographers have to be videographers also? I don't have to be anything. It's a good skill to have. It's up to you if you want to offer it. I personally worry about it becoming normal for people to hire a photographer / videographer. I believe that you do one thing extremely well, or neither. Even though so much, like I enjoy doing videography. I've done it. I actually, when I was in college, if I wasn't going to be a photographer, I always said I would be a filmmaker. I wanted to be a cinematographer. So I love cinematography. The principles are all the same, like compositionally and lighting wise. There's differences, of course, but the fundamentals are quite similar. But if I'm shooting for stills, I'm looking for moments. If I'm shooting for video, I'm still looking for these large moments. Like I want to follow a conversation where that's very lively and that kind of thing. But it's a very different thing. And I really want to focus on one or the other. I don't want to do both. I don't want to alternate. Because then I feel like if I'm doing videography for an hour, I'm not doing photography for an hour. So I'll have worse photography and worse videography. Or I should say less at the least. Less great stuff because I spent less time on it, because I had to split my time, that kind of thing. I have a lot of opinions or thoughts on where photography is going, which is not very exciting. I'm worried a bit. You know, I have not once looked to see how many people are watching. I think if the writing's on the wall in a lot of ways on where it's going, if you listen to what Canon has said, I say has, not have. I think it's a corporate entity, not a group of people. You know, they're not that far away from creating a camera that can record video that you can pull out stills that are just as good as stills are today. And at that point, it's going to require a lot less skill to capture moments when you can just film and then pull the stills. I mean, 30 frames per second is insane. The R6 does 20, and it's insane. And it's beyond what I'll ever need. I really don't think I would ever need that. But I think that's where it's going. And there's a lot of skills that even myself, in the little bit over a decade I've been doing this, that are getting outdated, you know? A lot of my autofocus abilities are already outdated due to eye detect and stuff. So those are a few of my thoughts on the whole video thing. So Paul says, what is the reason for black and white? Is it because there are too many color distractions? I talked about it earlier. I do it for a variety of reasons. Some aesthetic. Some images I feel work better in black and white. Sometimes I find an image that works well as a black and white and a color, and I will duplicate it and do one of each, but crop the black and white a little differently. Sometimes I do black and white to hide imperfections, or to me as a photographer, like shooting into getting a washed out image because I shot into the light and I didn't have a narrow field of view to kind of control that flaring. So there's a variety of reasons, some subjective, some not. I don't think silent shutters are that big of a deal. And even, especially in a mirrorless camera where they're quieter, even the mechanical is quieter, I don't think people really, it's that big of a deal. If there's people, unless it's a completely silent event, like people meditating, I just, it's not a big deal. I really don't think it's that necessary. Personally. It's not a bad thing to have. You know, I have experimented with the electronic shutter on the R6. It's super quiet. I mean, it makes like no noise. I mean, technically there's like, you hear a little something because you're right next to the camera, but if there's any noise at all, you're not even going to hear it. Do events ever want a video highlight, maybe a 1-minute teaser highlight? I contract out. I have someone film for me if they want that, and I am offering it more now and integrating it into my business. Like if I give a quote, I'll give a videography quote as well. But if they ask me, well, can you do both? I steer them away from it personally for the reasons I mentioned. I rarely will crop things out of my shots, but that's like not even a thing, you know what I mean? I don't like to change reality. I don't like crop a fire hydrant out of a shot, but that was just distracting enough. I took it out earlier today, actually. This is the one image I did a full edit on because I used it for the thumbnail. And what I kind of ended up liking is, rather than drawing more contrast between the two paints here, I decided to kind of neutralize it, keep it subtle, and create almost like really isolate them, almost like it's a studio shot. So earlier this week, I got during my last live stream, actually, I got 2 new Patreon supporters. I want to thank you guys. I'm looking for your names real quick. Logan, Chaplin, and I think Tim, you were about a week ago, but thank you as well. And Megan, also a new one. And last month, Stormy Renner. Thank you guys for your support. Thank you guys that have supported me, especially. You guys know who you are. Some of you guys found me pretty early in my YouTube career. So I see a lot of magenta color cast, so I might try to actually target that a little bit. Oh, come on. Oh, I'm on purple. Not too much. Like it. Comments from The Only Path. Do you have any concerns about photography as a field with a potential future where new pandemics become a new norm? A little bit. I'm hedging my bets now for a variety of reasons. So I start this YouTube channel. Number one, I just wanted to help people because it's like a big drive for me. I felt like I had to do everything on my own, and maybe that was self-imposed, but I never had a mentor in anything I've ever done in my life. I wanted to help people. 2, I simply thought about, okay, I teach, and I don't make a lot of money doing it. I do it because I love it, but I'm limited to 8 people at a time where I teach. Why not expand how many people I can help? Another one, I wanted more of a stable income so that I would know at least my fundamental expenses were covered and I wouldn't be dependent on booking work, and I could be more selective and not take particular jobs. I didn't want to be rich, but I wanted my own version of FU money where I could, because I'm so minimal, I don't need a lot, but where I had enough where I could really just follow my own path. Another one, because I have a holistic approach to photography, and I believe my physical fitness is a component of my overall abilities as a photographer. I didn't want to do this one, kind of like an athlete that wants to retire at the top of their game. I want to be able to do that as well, in a sense. I don't know if not because I want to retire at the best I can be, more so I just don't want to continue to do this if I feel like I'm not doing it as well as I had been able to. And then furthermore, I don't have a retirement plan as a photographer, and so having something I can do when I'm older was alluring. The pandemic has made me realize, like, wow, I think it's going to be smart either way. Now, if you're a professional photographer, I would recommend not necessarily that you do a YouTube channel. It's freaking hard. You guys know, I'm very open. I don't make money doing this, really. I make very, very little. Now, at least. But I'm a long-term thinker, and maybe down the line it will be better. But you should have plans. You should think about your retirement, and you're not going to have a retirement plan. And so whether it's investing or a YouTube channel, or you should have something, a plan. That's my opinion. I think there were a few more questions, but I kind of diverted my attention to editing. I said this would be a shorter live stream, but now I'm not so sure. I'm just going to keep going until I finish the edit. Comment. I love this picture in both color and black and white. They look like they could be anywhere. Thank you. Again, I don't know which image you're talking about because of the delay. Oh, I meant the one with the two men. I think I know which one you were talking. Would it be... I'm thinking you meant the one I'm pulling up right now, maybe? I love the one of the two women here, too. Paul, your photos are so great in both color and black and white. I definitely think the black and white has a bigger impact to draw you in. Great pics. Thank you. And Jerome, great black and white. Thank you, Jerome. Again, not a big proponent of removing things, but something benign like an outlet cover, switch cover thing. That's not a big deal to me. I'll remove that. Not that one? Alright, I got it wrong. Which one? For my next editing stream. So last week I had a job that they did not need editing for. And while normally I would not agree to it, she knows how to edit and she wanted to do it herself. And I trusted her work, and it's more complex, but I decided it would be okay for me to do a shoot and scoot, which is when you don't do an edit. So I didn't have to edit that job, but it was a fun job. And if they're cool with me sharing, maybe I'll share it with you guys and do a mock edit, or do an edit where I'm just looking for favorites that I might want to post to Instagram, and you guys can kind of check out that work. And it's going to be it's a very lively event. This is a more serious event, so it's a very different type of job. All right, sounds good. If you want to message me the screenshot. I've traveled a bit. I haven't traveled in a while, but like I went to Oregon for a Nike job for a few days, things like that. Usually, though, they are going to hire locally. Unless you kind of become like a house photographer almost, like if you work for an esports company or something like that, they might bring you to every tournament. Typically, though, like if there's a big conference in LA, they look at LA photographers. So here I loved the color. I loved the soft kind of pastels, I guess. But I do have a color version, you got to remember. So I knew I could make a good black and white out of one of the images. I decided to leave a few images in the collection, just a little bit more like dramatic and darker. I knew that earlier. A lot of the wider stuff, I really liked it. The look. I like this one. I do feel like I could kind of control the viewer's path a little bit tighter. There we go. Thoughts on film photography channels like Willem Verbeek, or I don't know who the other person is. I see them as popular channels, but not clickbaity channels. I like the more genuine approach. I'm not going to comment on specific channels if I don't have a favorable opinion of it. I'm a very open and honest and direct person, but in like an open forum, I don't ever want to like say anything negative about people, really. Like one-on-one, if we had a conversation and you asked me my honest opinion about a channel, I would give it to you. I'll tell you like my general. So I'm a YouTube viewer like you guys, you know. I especially when I decided to make a channel, I did a lot of research. You know, I wanted to see what people were doing. So if you guys, so I have favorites as well. I don't watch any photography YouTube anymore though, but you know I had my favorites and I had the people I liked, and there were some people I could not stand what they were doing. Idealistically, I'm not going to get upset about it, but like just again, just not emotionally, but I see what they're doing. I see the way they're like masquerading as being honest and objective, and they're not disclosing the free gifts they get or the free loaners, and they're not, and it's basically just one commercial for a product. You know, I don't, that's really bad. But here's my thoughts on like authenticity. And so I don't think anyone gets to be like the arbiter of who gets to have a YouTube channel. Like I like, by the way, this shot, like black and white where you have so much going on. So I don't think anyone has the right to say who should have a YouTube channel or not. I just think people need to be honest about their perspective, for example. So I would gladly watch a YouTube channel if I still watched photography channels, where if it's like an 18-year-old and they're like, hey guys, I just got into film photography, and it's about their journey. Totally interesting, actually. What I'm not into is when people pretend they're something they are not, or speak like they are an authority on a subject matter that they know very little about, or if they're just regurgitating other YouTubers' information. You ever notice how most of the stuff is all the same on YouTube? Well, it's because where are they getting their info? YouTube. So it's a big feedback loop, you know? So I don't think I'm going to change much to these images. So that's my issue mostly with YouTube stuff. When I was doing my research, I'm okay with talking about it. I'm not going to call anyone specific out, but just talking about general stuff. These are too similar, I think. But whatever. When I was doing my research, I actually thought to look at these people's portfolios, and I was shocked at what I discovered. Now, a lot of these big YouTubers have good portfolios, but only because they've been flown to like all these events where they're provided models and the lighting is set up for them, you know what I mean? And they're testing lenses out and basically producing a commercial for Canon, Nikon, Sony for free. So I looked at their portfolios early on, back when like there was only one channel that had 1 million subscribers. And some of them, their work was just bad, in my opinion. Some of them, 50% of the shots were of his wife, and he was a professional photographer, but he didn't really have the portfolio to prove it. And then there's the phenomenon where they are on YouTube as professional photographers. However, when you go to their website, and I did dig deeper to see if there was another website, it's just selling Lightroom presets. Here's a shot. I am here. I was asked about being disappointed. Yeah, I'm disappointed here. It happens, but grandma and bride are not in focus. I was either watching her, whatever reason, I missed it. I'm not sure why. Could be the camera, could be me. I don't recall. But it's a good moment, even though I have a few others in color that were more in focus. But it's a good moment, and they're not going to care it's out of focus. I mean, they might care, but they'd rather have that image out of focus and not have it. You have to consider that. Okay, I'm going to move a little faster, but because I care about the quality of my work, once I'm not streaming, I'll probably do a once over. But I don't want to be editing forever. So these days, I feel like I've wasted a lot of time in life, and I'm not punishing myself for it, but I'm embracing making up for it. And I work really, really hard now. I don't really do anything during the day, but I don't have distractions. But I also do it in a sustainable, healthy way. So normally I take breaks. I have a good method for working where I account for a lot of short breaks that keep me fresh. And I'm totally okay with it, and I don't feel burnt out. Well, I've gotten to a point where I felt a little burnt out, but it's like I'm working really hard, but playing hard too. And for me, that doesn't mean drinking at night. It means like I'm doing what I love, you know? I'm taking Brixton to the dog beach, and I'm training at jiu-jitsu and working out really, really, really hard. And so basically a day like today couldn't be more perfect. I'll work hard all day, and then at about 6, I get to go to jiu-jitsu, you know? There's nothing greater than that. Working hard at something you care about, and then getting to do something you love. All right. So let me know if you guys have questions, real quick. I'm gonna quickly see if I got a bunch of messages. I want to check those real quick. Someone wants to send me a message. I know who it is. Thanks for the Instagram story plug. Oh, that was one of my favorite shots, the one you used. I think that's one of my favorites. I mean, I guess that's why I used it as a thumbnail. But yeah. I'm so profound. Come on. You know, it's kind of like all the self-help books that come out. They say the same thing that's been said for like 2,000 years or more, just repackaged in a new way for new audiences. There's these fundamental truths. Here's a cool wide shot I liked, where I pretty much got everybody. Yeah, but sometimes you have to do nothing too. Like, you can't. There's stuff that's sustainable for like a week or even 3 weeks or even maybe a month. But at some point, like, there are things that aren't going to be sustainable beyond. And then you have to like take time. And if you don't take time and you wait till you're burnt out, the recovery I found can last. It ends up being counterproductive. So I've worked like so hard that then like I go into like the pendulum swings back too hard, and then I'm not very productive for like 10 days. Like I was doing for both work and workouts. Like I was working out too hard for a bit that my body crashed and I had to recover, and the recovery took so long that I felt like I lost what I had gained. And I think that can happen with your photography or anything. So it's better to find a sustainable way of working over a long period of time. And it took me a long time in life, but I finally can turn it off at night, you know? When I first started as a photographer, I love the way these guys are standing here. I think it would be nice if I got a tight shot of it too, but I like that they're in the mix and they're all kind of posing without knowing they're posing. But yeah, when I first started, like you don't have a 9 to 5 as a photographer. You're always on, and especially when you're starting out and you don't have I didn't have a day job. I taught, but very little. And so I never felt secure, and I'd go to bed thinking about photography. I couldn't fall asleep. I'd wake up and I'd be like stressed all the time, and it was counterproductive because I was less effective in my work and got less done because I was so stressed. Whereas now, I'm actually able to turn it off at night. I work during the day, but once like I'm in bed, I'm done. You know, I don't watch TV until I'm in bed, and I use it to fall asleep. But then I'm done. I stop thinking. Paul, I'm in LA. And in normal times, I teach for the Department of Cultural Affairs at 2 different art centers. There have been talks about us going back in fall, but I doubt it. In fact, I have not even been able to get my own belongings for over a year and a half from the art center. I don't even know what I have there at this point. I know I have stuff. I'm curious how many people are in LA, by the way. I mean, probably no one here right now, but... Um, what's too expensive? Which country would you like to do street photography in? I visited Israel 2 years ago and didn't bring my DSLR or film camera. Biggest mistake ever. Um, I went to Israel once. Barely shot, to be honest. I didn't own a DSLR. It was like 2007, I think. 2008. Kind of during that transitionish sort of transitional period. That's what I'm trying to say. I mean, like I had a digital point and shoot, but a lot of serious photography was still shot on film. Serious photography. When I went to Europe and I traveled through like 10 countries, I did a little bit of photography, but not that much. I hadn't taken an interest in street photography at that point. And I believe that it's not that you're not present if you're doing street photography. You're present to street. You're a different experience than the experience of just like being present and exploring. It's different. What happened to this image? When I went to Europe, it was like a childhood dream. I didn't come from a family that vacationed in Europe, you know what I mean? And I earned every penny that I used to go on that trip. And it was like the trip of a lifetime. And I wanted to just be present and enjoy it. I didn't go on the trip for photography. I did a little bit. I was taking an interest in videography like when I went to Mexico City for work. So I did a lot of that, and I did a lot of video in Europe too. But I didn't do that much photography, and I don't regret it. I did the exact trip I wanted to do at that time, but I would like to do a different trip next time. It was the right trip for the right time. But next time I'm going to do a different trip. I'd like to do more street photography elsewhere. I don't think it's that essential to go to a different country to do street photography. I mean, if you live in a small town, then maybe you need to get out. And there's so many, like, America's funny. Like, I've never been to the Grand Canyon, but everyone that comes out here goes to the Grand Canyon, Death Valley. I've never been to either, So I think we neglect what's in our backyard. I like these images. Now, people looking at a cell phone, it's the context that makes it meaningful. They had half the family in India, and they were participating via Zoom and like live streams, and I thought that was really nice, and it was something I wanted to capture a lot of. Although it's possible they're doing a selfie in that shot, I'm not sure. And yeah, LA is expensive. It's not the most expensive, and I think San Francisco is still quite a bit more expensive. Obviously, New York is very expensive. Yeah, it's ridiculous. Problem is, like, we're paid more in California, but not more to offset the higher cost of living. That's why a lot of people are leaving. And photography is competitive, and it doesn't matter if you're like, at least skill-wise, you're at the top of your game and better than a lot of people. When there's so much competition, it just brings down the average price. So let's say you're the best, and and you want to charge $1,000, and the worst charges $100. But if the worst now charges $1, it gets harder to just justify the 1,000 or whatever. So the gap does actually kind of matter in a way, in my opinion, from what I've seen, and comparing it to other things. Do I love doing religious stuff over like weddings? I don't really care what I photograph. I mean, there are some jobs that are more enjoyable for a variety of reasons. But I've really when I was younger, I would be more mindful of the time, and at weddings I just wanted it to end, especially when I was second shooting, and so it was more of a job than like your job. And I would look at the time a lot, and just, especially when it was like a 9, 10, 11, 12 hour day. Now, no matter what it is, all I do is I stay present, and the time flies actually when you do that. I'm not thinking about what I'm going to do when I get home. I'm not thinking about anything. I'm just there. And so to a degree, it doesn't matter what I'm shooting. I thought when I was younger, I was more idealistic, and I thought I hated weddings because there was a whole industry that I resented. Like, it was telling brides what their wedding had to look like, and taking advantage, and I didn't like it, and I thought I hated weddings. But a wedding is an event. It's not that different than anything I'm doing. I shoot formal portraits at events as well. So yeah, there's not too much of a difference worth noting. I'm guessing you love. Okay, it's 11 p.m. in London, and I need to go to sleep early tomorrow. So reluctantly, I'm going to say goodnight, but I'll watch the rest tomorrow. All right, have a good night. I'm wrapping up pretty soon, but you can check out the end tomorrow. When I'm photographing protests, like 2 to 3 hours can go by, and I won't notice until the light changes. Yep, exactly. If you're really engaged and just present and not trying to be in the past or future, it just flies. And your work will be a million times better. Okay, so here's one where I kind of want to crop in and do like a more traditional rule of thirds, but then I like the balance of the symbol here and that. And I think I actually, in a color version, experimented, and I determined it wasn't worth the crop. But like, that could actually work. Maybe I'll do that. I'll do that. I'm losing a lot of his body. Yeah, it's a tricky one. I'm just going to leave it as is. If you guys stick around, I'm almost done, and then I'll show you guys how I export, because I've actually finished the black and white conversions are the last thing I do. Everything's been edited already. Let's try the dehaze, see if we can do anything here. Not worth. And typically, just to give you guys an accurate idea of what, if you're new to the whole job, I would not normally work this slow. Or I'd be effectively turning like my 200 an hour rate to like 20 an hour, which is terrible, right? So I normally would work much quicker, and I wouldn't be sacrificing much quality. But explaining what I'm doing and giving a little bit more care to the images, just a little bit, is making it take a lot longer. That looks terrible. It's fine. One thing I want to really do But again, it's kind of like, I don't really make money on YouTube, but I want to spend money on YouTube, and it's a tough one, to get myself to do. But I really want to get a camera that I can live stream my events with. I saw it's funny, again, like, so the Canon M50 Mark II, although it practically is a repackaged Mark I with software enhancements, there's what seems like a killer feature to me, because I don't know any other way to do it or any other camera that will do it, but you can live stream straight to YouTube. So I'm like, that's interesting. I want to know more about that. But not one person on YouTube has really talked about it. They gloss over it. I'm like, that's the real feature, the interesting feature. I think it might be the first camera that can do it. So I kind of want to get one. So I can stream. Here's an example of like using black and white to kind of, let's call it, make up for a shortcoming of an image. But yeah, I want to get that camera and be able to like stream live my jobs. Put it in the corner. You guys can see me work. Get an idea of what it would be like to shoot an event without actually having to be there. Maybe you're interested in being an event photographer, but you're in a small town, so it's not like you can just second shoot or assist. And I don't think, I've said it before, you don't need to go to school to be a photographer, but I think you should respect the craft and learn it. Okay. Thanks, Paul. I don't know about being an inspiration, but thank you. I'm going to quickly scroll through everything, then I'm going to do my export. So if you came late, you'll see a few of the first images. Now's a good time to ask questions, because once the export's done, I'm going to sign right off. So a lot of what I post to Instagram have been older jobs, because I've put those in a Google Drive folder, which I then download from to my phone and all that. But I'm going to get better about exporting new work to that folder. Right now I do everything one by one manually, but I believe that Instagram and Facebook finally has a studio tool that you can use to kind of schedule and everything, because for me it's such a chore. I'm not into social media, but I do want to post to Instagram more often, and I'm working at that. So eventually I want to look into that to automate it a bit. So overall, like, if you understand anything, like if you understand photography and you know all the variables, and you're not just getting lucky with like super good lighting, etc., your work will be very consistent. You don't have bad jobs. But within a small window, you can still have some variation. And so I have had jobs where I'm personally disappointed, and the way I deal with it is, like, first of all, I usually know it's not because of me. It's usually the variables weren't great. They weren't in my favor. There was bad lighting, unhappy people, whatever, and I did the best I could. And sometimes you have a job where everything is great, the lighting situation, you have great walls and ceilings to bounce flash off of if you need to, etc., and you're just on fire. I mean, you're on fire. I tend to be on fire when I'm not hungry, even though I know how to fast. Like, if I eat and before a job, I think it helps a bit. When I'm shooting often, so maybe I had a job the day before, but I'm not too tired from it, so I'm in practice, kind of. And when you're just on fire, it's a great feeling. So this job, I was pretty happy with. It was a good job. It wasn't like I didn't find like all my variables to be the greatest in the world, but I'm quite happy with how everything turned out. Okay, so I clicked off my blue label. I have 1,400 photos. Wow, I did a good edit. And I probably could edit down more, but again, I don't have all the time in the world. So you do the best you can, and you try to get it as tight an edit as you can, because you don't want to put the burden of finding the best of two very similar images on your client. But you know, this is a business, and you can't spend 8 hours editing a job. So I'm pretty happy with my edit. I'm not editing for a number, but I was actually able to get 2,800 down to 1,400. Now there's certain kinds of jobs where I can shoot 300 images and I edit down like 10 only. It happens. Not because I wasn't strict with my editing, but all the conditions were ideal. I didn't feel the need to do any burst shots, etc. And so I've talked about some jobs I can edit in 20 minutes. I meant it. Not all of them. Okay, so I have everything selected, my picks and my non-picks, unpicked, whatever the terminology is. Let's take a look. Flagged and unflagged. I'm going to hit Command A, hit Tab, go to Export right here. I often do depends on the client, and I offer it, but I don't charge, but I will do a secondary gallery if they want of social media sized files, which would be that 2048 pixels with a resolution of 72. You can see it on the screen there. I do that as a courtesy, but also if they post your high resolution work on social media without any resizing, it will look terrible, and that can reflect poorly on you. There's one thing clients will do that I have not really found a solution. I haven't figured out how to word it to them to get them to not do it, but they'll take your perfectly composed images and they put it on Instagram and use Instagram's default croppings, which are not the actual aspect ratio of the image. So I use a third-party app to do that, for example, prior to posting to Instagram. And that's frustrating. You know, it does make your work look bad, but I don't get upset. All right, so same folder as original. I put a subfolder, and I usually do JPEGs high resolution, and I will do a secondary gallery, like I said, secondary gallery in social media sized. I'll add it to my catalog because I want to be able to see it here. JPEGs, sRGB. I'm not going to resize because I'm doing my high resolution files, and now I will hit export, and that will be it. It will begin the export. Next, I will, once it's completed exporting, I upload to SmugMug, which is what I happen to use, but there's plenty of other like file hosting sites. I've used SmugMug for a very long time, so it's not like I'm trapped. You know, I can't change now, but I'm happy with them. And that's that. So I'll answer the questions, and then I'm gonna go. So on YouTube, how do you live stream on YouTube using a Canon M50 Mark II? That's what I want to find out. But nobody, why is the camera not focusing? But nobody has really, nobody's really made that video. Like nobody's gone through the process because I guess there's no incentive for them to do that on YouTube. And I want to do it. And I'm not a shill, and I've turned down every like free piece of gear for the most part. If there's any strings attached, but if Canon would help me out and provide me with one, I would love to do that and be able to do something productive on YouTube, like live streaming an event, showing other photographers what the job is like. I mean, maybe that's a very niche market, like someone who needs that live streaming capability, but I don't think so, because I think that's their primary like target. They're really going for people that are making content with the M50, not like full-fledged photographers. I actually thought it was also a great camera. I did have the original, but I don't anymore. So on YouTube, are you just suggesting what I search? I tried that. I didn't find anything when I did it. I didn't find anything when I did it, so maybe there is now. And then the only path, do you ever make your digital photos look like film? No, not anymore, for a few reasons. I said in the stream earlier, I paid for all those Visco to try it out, to be a guinea pig. I wanted to maybe make a video on it a long time ago. So I tried it out, but 90% of them didn't look like the film they were supposed to look like, and you'd have to tweak them so much to get them to actually look that way that I felt like what was the point? I might as well do it on my own. I liked a few of the film simulations, like the Tri-X, but these days, no, I don't. I also don't do as much black and white photography because of the type of events I'm doing. It was very relevant to this type of job, but a lot of like corporate photography, you don't want to make black and whites. I don't want to get into that right now. And so no, and also because I will often shoot film for fun. I haven't done it in a little while, but for a very, very long time, I would bring a roll of film to every job for myself for fun. This would have been a good job to do it on, but I had too much going on that day. I had 2 jobs in one day, both long, and with a lot of driving in LA, so I wanted to minimize the amount of stuff I carried. All right. Thank you guys for watching. Please, love your feedback. Get in touch. You can email me with your feedback. I'd appreciate it. If you want to support this channel, I would really love it if you checked out my Patreon page. That's the best way I can support you further as well, because you can get feedback from me. Even at the $5 level, you unlock bonus content and can email me once a month with any questions you have. If you want to support at a higher level, I can do portfolio reviews with you. I can help you write your SEO, which is a huge one if you want to get actual business without, it's really hard at first, and it's the easiest way if you're good at it, I think, to get business, because then people just come to you without you having to make calls, without you networking. You just have a good presence online. So I can help you with that. Portfolio reviews, job reviews, you name it. Whatever you need. All right, thank you guys for watching. I appreciate it. You guys take care.